everybody, my name is LaTanya. I am an 8th grade social studies, language arts, and history teacher in Southern California. And just a few days ago, I got the wonderful news that in a matter of a few weeks, I will have the joy, the honor, and the privilege of welcoming students back into the classroom with me after being virtual for an entire year. And so today, I wanted to share a moment that I had with one of my students in the virtual setting last week that inspired me to kind of share some strategies that I feel like has really served me well as a language arts teacher, especially at the middle school setting. So last week we were in virtual class, and we were wrapping up our study on the book we had just finished, or the excerpt of a book we had just finished from Boy in the Striped Pajamas. And one of my students, who at that point had been kind of a reluctant reader, in my class at least, wrote in the chat like, man, I can't believe Miss Robinson has actually made me enjoy reading. Now for me, I don't know if this is the right thing to say out loud, but that's the kind of stuff that keeps me going. It's not necessarily the test scores, the state testing, the iReady test, the district assessments that make me feel like I'm doing a good job as a teacher. It is literally those moments, because that came out of really nowhere. It felt very genuine, and it touched me so much that I had to take a picture of myself and post it on Instagram to document that moment, because middle schoolers aren't going to say anything they don't necessarily feel. They're kind of past that whole I want to be the teacher's pet thing. And so I thought, well, maybe I can just share the experience I had in sharing this book or excerpts of this book with my students, and what it was about that process that I think made this student see like the joy and the pleasure that can be derived from reading. So I'm going to show you what I did, and I have the luxury and the ability to do this on this very nice large 85-inch interactive display that is from Samsung. I am very lucky to be able to have such a piece of technology in my classroom, and this is what I'll be using to kind of do the same strategies that I'm going to show you guys in just a few minutes that I had to do virtually just a few weeks ago. So I think the key to getting kids really into a story, whether it be a passage, a chapter book, or whatever the case is, it's just really taking the time to build background knowledge. I know that it is so easy to kind of skip that process because we always feel short on time and we feel pressed for time. But I have found that if you really spend some time devoting to giving students the opportunity to acquire that background knowledge they need to access the text better, that makes all the difference. So the Boy in the Striped Pajamas is set during the Holocaust, and so I spent quite a few days with my students just making sure they understood that the Holocaust was much more than just about Hitler, because they all knew who Hitler was. They had a sense of who the Nazis were, but historically they didn't understand how Germany got to the point that they were at and the different perspectives that Germans may have had during that particular time. So definitely you want to start off by building some background knowledge that is going to require you maybe putting in a little bit more time and preparing the lesson and not being able to just rely on your curriculum, but it really is worth it. So we did that, and then we started looking at the passage. And the nice thing about this particular excerpt that we were working with is I knew that there was a movie that was made based on this book. And I had the audio version of this book, which I thought was another added layer that kind of kept students engaged, because it was just a different voice that they got to hear as opposed to me reading it, or as opposed to the voice that's available to them on the website that we use, which is StudySync. In addition to making sure that you take time to build background, I always try and see if there's any sort of media that I can incorporate. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas really lent itself very well to that, because there's a movie that is based on this book. And one of the things that I was really concerned this year with teaching this piece with my students is that they were only getting this very isolated chapter to interact with. They didn't know what had happened prior to the chapter, really. They didn't know what had happened after that. And so I decided, well, let me go on YouTube. You can find almost anything on YouTube, and see if I can find pivotal moments of the story just in clips. Like, can I find little pieces of this movie that will kind of tell the story leading up to the scene that we're reading, and then kind of let the students know how the story ends in case they were curious. And I was able to find that. So as a part of the building background, I showed them clips that led up to the scene that we were reading, so they had a good idea of the characters involved. The two main characters that we were focused on were Bruno and Shmuel and Lieutenant Cutler. So I wanted them to know what their personalities were like, what kind of interactions had occurred prior to that. And so we watched some YouTube clips, and that really helped kids get into the chapter that we were gonna look at. So once we had spent some time building background, giving them historical context, watching some movie clips to introduce them to the characters that the chapter was going to be focused on, then we obviously read. We read the chapter together. We read it a few times. I would say by the end of our study of this, we had listened to the excerpt 4 to 5 times, and each time with a different purpose. The first read was just, let's just listen to this. Let's just listen to this chapter and respond to it and react to it based on our first read. And then every time thereafter, there was a specific thing that we were listening for or analyzing as we listened to it. So by the time that they were given this writing assignment that kind of showed me whether or not they grasped the chapter the way that I wanted them to, they had heard the chapter 4 to 5 times, and we had discussed it as a class and in small groups 4 to 5 times. So we read it, we talked about it, we talked freely about it, we asked questions, we answered questions, and it just was a fluid conversation. I think as teachers, especially those of us that love teaching language arts, and that kind of behavior comes naturally when we read, we don't realize that that's something you have to kind of introduce your students to, or teach them how people talk about books. So I would always say, like, if I were in a book club, I would be having these questions, or I would want to know this, or I would bring out this point. And so just kind of showing them, let's kind of pretend like we're not in school, and like maybe we're just people that met up because we all read this really great book and we want to talk about it. So now that I know that my students are coming back in person in just a few weeks, I thought it would be great in this video to not only share with you like the steps that I've been taking over the years to kind of engage students in passages and stories and texts that we're reading, but also show you how I plan to integrate the use of this interactive display along the way to just kind of enhance and amplify what I feel like has been working for me over the years. So I've set up a couple of things ahead of time just in the interest of time, but going forward with our next lessons in Study Sync, or even if we're looking at history, these are some of the ways that I plan on using the display in class. So what I've already done is I've taken screen grabs of important parts of the excerpt that we had access to, because they have a prompt that's asking them to identify a change in a particular character. And in that chapter, there's a defined moment where the character goes from one kind of set of behaviors to another set of behaviors, and I wanted those to just be out and present for students to see so that we can kind of discuss through it. So I opened up the passage on Study Sync, and I use this tool here. It's a little square that will pop up that's going to allow you to either cut a piece of what you're looking at if you wanted to do that, take a picture of it, which is what I did, print a portion of what's in the box. And so I took a picture of the sections that I thought would be important. So this top section is at the beginning of the chapter where the character is, you know, for lack of a better term, just happy-go-lucky, cheerful, oblivious to the situation that his friend is in. And so I wanted to remind them of what he was like at that point in the chapter. So we talked about this quite a bit. Now, if we were in class, they would have this visible to them just kind of in their faces, and I would know that they're seeing it because I'm projecting it for them. The second piece is the second half of the chapter where the change has occurred, and this is the precise moment where as a teacher you would hope they realize, oh, here's the change in character, because that is what the prompt is asking them to identify. What was the change and what caused the change? Now, what I really like about this display and what I'm really looking forward to is the ability for me to have everything kind of out and open at once. Instead of me kind of like fumbling back over to my computer or saying pull this out, or me having to just go back and forth and get things set up the way that I want them to be seen and the order I want them to be seen, I can do multiple things and display multiple things at once on the display. So the first thing that I would want to do is, let's look at the prompt. So again, I'm going to use this little feature here. I'm going to take a picture of just the prompt because I want that to be seen at all times. So I'm going to click that. It takes a picture of it for me. And now I have the ability to move that around. So here's the prompt, okay? So now that the prompt is visible, we would obviously kind of dissect the prompt. In my class, we call it tap the prompt. I would read it along with them. It says, in the excerpt, Bruno undergoes a change. Write a response in which you describe what changes, why it changes, and what larger observation about life you can draw from the situation. Cite evidence from the text to support your response. So of course, I would have a student come up and kind of underline some key points. It says that Bruno undergoes a change, so I know that that's what we're looking for. The response, I need to describe what changes. I need to describe why it changes. I need to talk about larger observations about life, and I need to make sure that I have text evidence. So again, I know that students can see this. It's on display. We've underlined, identified what absolutely positively needs to be done, and it's right there along with two parts of the excerpt that I want them to really be focused on, like I'm guiding them to the information that I want them to know. So at this point, if I were teaching this in person, I would be able to simultaneously have the prompt displayed for students with the ways that we have marked it up and identified key features or key points that we need to respond to. Two portions of text evidence that are also key parts of the passage that you would really want students to pay attention to and be focused on. And then to make just it more engaging and more visual for students that might need that to kind of help them remember what we read or help them to just focus on what they're thinking about, I can show them the clip that we had watched as a class all at the same time. So right now I have the scene that represents the chapter that we read or the movie interpretation of the chapter that we read, and it's up and it's present for them and it's visible so that they can kind of see visually what was happening at that particular point in the story. Now, had I not had this display, there would have been a lot of me, okay, let me go back to the computer, let me open that up for you, or let me hold up my book and show you what I'm talking about, or let me just tell you, oh, paragraph blank is where I want you to look. Now, not only are they doing that at their desk in terms of identifying the paragraphs and looking in their personal books, but I also know that they're able to see it up here and they're able to see how we've marked it together. And so those kinds of things just inherently make lessons like this a little bit more engaging, a little bit more interactive, and I was not able to do that in the virtual setting. So for me to have taught this lesson in the virtual setting and still have a student feel as though they got a lot out of it and really made them see like just the joy in reading, I can only imagine what that would be like, you know, in person, in class with students, having all these capabilities with technology and kind of bringing things to the forefront of everybody's minds and eyes. So I'm super excited to kind of use this in that way as we go forward for the rest of the year with the rest of the passages that we're going to be looking at in Study Sync, with history instruction. And then just for some of the fun capabilities, like there's games that we play that now we can display it on screen instead of everybody kind of being on their Chromebooks playing together. So definitely having something like this to engage students with is a huge plus, a huge bonus. It's going to help me to kind of amplify my lessons even more throughout the coming weeks and throughout the coming years, because I will be using this on a regular basis. I think the key to just getting kids to love reading is if you love reading, you got to show them that. You got to show them that you're just as excited about this passage as you want them to be, that you're just as moved by it as you want them to be. Taking that time to build background knowledge, looking for those resources that are going to bring things to life, especially if it's something like historical fiction and there's things that kids need to know to understand characters and why they're motivated by things. Really breaking things down together, marking it up, letting them know to like highlight whatever stands out to you. If you think it's interesting, if you think it's wrong, if you have questions, highlighting that. And then just teaching them how to talk about what they're reading, how to conversate about it, modeling it for them, letting them know what you've done if you're a part of a book club and some of the questions you may have had if you've read a text outside of the classroom as well. So I know having that moment with that student, it is something I will always remember. And that is always one of the things that I find to be the biggest compliment, is if I have a student say something like that, or if I have a parent come back to me, you know, after the school year is up and say, my child really loves reading now because you kind of invested that time and showed them how enjoyable reading can be. So I hope that this was helpful to you. This is something that I feel like worked well for me at the elementary level, because I've taught elementary before, as well as the middle school level. It's just really digging deep into text and really taking that time with your students and not being rushed by like district calendars and curriculum maps. I said that. They're there, you need to follow them to a certain extent, but you gotta really flex with your students and really let your students get into it the way that you want them to. So if this video was helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. If you'd like more information on this Samsung 85-inch interactive display, let me know and I will get that information to you. Like I said, I'm really excited about the possibilities that this is gonna open up in my classroom. And if you have any questions, concerns in general, let me know. But as always, as I say on my other vlogs or on my other videos, I hope that everyone is well. And if you are not well, please be well. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, happy teaching. Bye.